WNST, Towels, look now, but here comes the American League East again, and don't look now, but here come the Tampa Rays again, who are very, very formidable all of a sudden. We're used to going down there into the big tent in St. Pete and seeing no one there and a bad baseball team the last few years. While the Orioles have feasted, things have changed down there, and the pitching is certainly much better. I've had a lot of conversations with this guy in the last several years here, getting back onto the beat of doing daily radio. Neil Solondz joins us here from Tampa. He is hosting the pre- and post-game version of the Rays, and you got a lot of more happy, upbeat post-games here lately, Neil, than you've had in recent years. This is a pretty good team right now, and certainly a team with a lot of decisions to be made over the next 6 weeks, much like the Orioles in a year where they didn't think they were going to compete, right?
They've been exciting. I mean, I think that the biggest thing that the fans have been excited about is the way they've scored runs. I mean, you're talking about a team that's been right at the top of the American League and the Major League in home runs hit, top third of the league in runs scored. They do it in different ways, too. It's not only the home run. They've got good athletes, and they make things happen. They've basically been able to outscore their mistakes so far this year, which, usually we're talking first and foremost about the pitching, and really it's been the offense.
Every guy on the roster has stolen a base. It's outrageous. I mean, I've never heard of such a thing in the middle of June. Literally every guy has stolen a base.
And the guy who really has made it happen is the guy who probably, were it not for injuries, would be in AAA right now, and that's Malik Smith. He's the guy that the Rays got in the Drew Smyly trade from Atlanta, from Seattle, but was dealt from Atlanta the same day. And the Rays, I think one of the big reasons they got him was Kevin Kiermaier was out 2 months last year, and they had a major drop-off when he went down. They were close to 500 before he fractured his wrist. He went down. They went 20 games under 500. And Malik may not be the same defender that KK is, but he puts a lot of pressure on the defense, makes things happen, is kind of your old-fashioned, old-school leadoff type hitter. And he really plays with a lot of energy, and I think it's really been a boost for this group the last couple of weeks.
You going to get me a Kevin Kiermaier Star Wars bobblehead this weekend, Neil?
I think I can work on that for you. that can be done.
I'm not that guy at all. I just think it's fascinating that's happening this weekend. I've been warned there are going to be a lot of people in the stands, and I did a little Google work on this. They're already pre-selling them for $45 a piece out on eBay already, and they're not even distributed yet. But he is quite the teen idol down there, and a franchise that has been a little bereft of star power and draw power and all that. They love him down there, right?
They do, and look, they signed him long-term, in spring training, and that was considered a big deal because you look at the three, what I would call franchise-type players on the roster, KK, Evan Longoria, and Chris Archer, and they're all signed for the long haul, and that was kind of, okay, you signed your cornerstone pieces, and that's why it was kind of unfortunate that KK got hurt on a play where, it really didn't have to happen that way. He went feet-first slide into first, trying to avoid a collision with Jose Abreu. Team was up big at the time, and now he's out because of a fractured hip for a couple months, but I don't think that changes the way the fans look at him. I mean, he always plays with a tremendous amount of energy. Again, supreme defender, and a guy the Rays missed, but I think they're fairly optimistic they're going to get him back at some point this year. And if that's the case and the team continues to play well, I mean, that's almost like getting a trade addition in August.
Now, every time we get together, I'm always pimping your pitching as being potentially the best pitching. And, I was sort of blinded into this. I thought you would have been a better team last year. I thought the Astros were going to be a better team last year. Both teams seemingly putting it together to some degree this year and putting it together not with new pieces. I mean, Keuchel's back to being Keuchel this year, and they're better. Mm-hmm. And in your case, we've talked about Andrees. We've talked about Archer. We've talked about Odorizzi. We've talked about Cobb over and over and over again. I mean, we see you guys almost 20 times a year. We see you on 6 different appearances, although this week we'll see you this weekend and next weekend up here. Mm-hmm. But, we've seen the good and the bad and the ugly and all the injuries of all of this. But it really feels like, and Neil, I've talked to others in Tampa about this week. I do this every day, and I look up and down other teams' pitching every day, and I talk to people, and every team has a pitcher these days who's got a 6 or 6.5, who's a dozen starts in that they can't figure out what to to do with. And in Baltimore, we had like 3 of them. I mean, that's Jimenez. That's Tillman, whose ERA's 8, and he's still making starts at this point. Same thing with, Wade Miley's heading in that direction, and Gosman's been a mess. But a lot of places, they don't have the ability, much like Tampa was like, well, if Archer's arm's not falling off, we'll go out there and let him lose 15 games if he has to, because he's going to make his start and he's going to improve. And lo and behold, at least for the first 8-10 weeks of this year, most of these guys are trending in a direction where I could buy into August in this rotation and this team being 12 games over 500. I could see that.
You could. I think, look, Chris has taken a big step forward this year because he's thrown more strikes and he hasn't tried to do too much. If you look at his second half last year, he was substantially better, and I think because he put less pressure on himself. And I think the thing that helps him this year more than anything is having Alex Cobb back. Alex Cobb is starting to turn into the Alex Cobb of old. And I think that means a lot for the group, the rotation, not only because of the fact that he gives you a steady, probably more veteran starting pitcher than you have on this roster, because he's really also got a bulldog mentality. And when David Price was traded, Alex was to be the number 1, and then he needed Tommy John the year after. So he never got the chance to kind of take the mantelpiece, and I think he started to take that. And I think that, and also the way that Jake Faria has pitched since coming up from AAA.
Yeah, tell me about him. Like, that's got to be exciting, right? I mean, to have a kid come up like that at this point where things could go the right way the next 6 weeks, and maybe you wouldn't be buyers, but you'd be in the race instead of being sellers, which I think, look, all the general managers have been feasting and burning up the phone lines down there, even into the offseason, saying, we would take Odorizzi or Archer on July 31st if things are right, and I don't think your organization's going to go that way 5 weeks from now. Doesn't feel that way to me anyway.
There are some who think they still could trade someone. I'm hoping they're in a position where they either add or stay the same. I think there's some people who think, okay, you could move an Alex Cobb because of the fact that he's a free agent after this year. You're not going to get anything for him otherwise. If Blake Snell, who got sent down to AAA, continues to improve and pitches well enough that you feel the rotation's not going to take a hit, if they get to that point and they're near first place, I would hope they hold on to him just because I think of all the things he provides. And I think this is, even though I think the East is the toughest division right now in baseball, I also think it's a very winnable division. I think all 5 teams have lots of flaws. And, I think other than Houston, there's not a team in the American League that's running away with it. So if you're close to the pack and you think you can get hot and you're adding Wilson Ramos and you're adding Brad Boxberger and maybe you'll add guys getting healthy like Kiermaier and Andrees, why not go for it?
He is Neil Solondz. He does all things Tampa Rays pre- and post-game. You can follow his journey out on Twitter. It is spelled NeilSolondz, and he is one of our defending champions who loves baseball. And, for the Orioles and the fall apart here, Neil, you got to be kind of shocked when you look down at the stats and the pitching and the lack of pitching and going 3 weeks without having any game that goes below 5 runs. It has been literally a historically bad version of starting pitching. The bullpen's falling apart. You're not going to see Chris Davis. You're not going to see J.J. Hardy. You're not going to see Britton or O'Day. I mean, it's a different version than what I think a lot of people believed in the offseason. Could be a little shaky, but Bundy's been great up until recently, but we can't figure Gosman out. Certainly no one can figure Jimenez out, and you're going to get another dose of him this weekend. He pitched himself back into the rotation last week with a really nice start on Sunday, but it has been a real hot mess around here, bro.
I think the biggest surprise of the group is Tillman. I mean, look, I know he started the year injured, but he at least has been kind of like the consistency of the group where you felt, okay, I know what I'm getting every 5th day. Gosman, I understand, and Bundy's kind of been like your Tillman this year so far, but nobody else has stepped up. And I think probably the bigger losses though are Britton and O'Day, because if the rotation was just okay and you're giving up 3 or 4 runs in 5 or 6 innings, you always felt that when you were facing the Orioles that those guys would hold it down. And now everybody's kind of moving up 2 steps on the ladder into a different role, and I think that has really thrown everything out of whack because, it's like moving up your 6 or 7 hitter into 4 or 5 in the lineup. They're good where they are, but maybe they're not ready to take on that big role.
So for you guys in this offense and where it is, I guess this summer, I look up and I say, wow, Dickerson, what a year, right? I mean, and out in Colorado, maybe you saw some flashes of this, but you look down and you're like, maybe this guy's a late blossom superstar kind of guy. I mean, Ortiz was a late blossom superstar. I mean, it wouldn't be the first guy to sort of figure it out 4 or 5 years into the party, right?
Well, I talked to Dante Bichette, lives in the Tampa Bay area, and Dante was a hitting coach in Colorado, and one of his hitting coaches. And when the Rays got him, he said, Neil, this guy could win a batting title. He's that skilled. And I think that if you look at the second half of Corey's year last year, he maybe wasn't this good, but he was significantly better. I think it was an adjustment to a new league that was tough for him. I think it was adjustment to American League East pitching that was a challenge for him. And it was the first time he really had to DH on a regular basis. And then beyond that, the year before, he had plantar fasciitis. So he really didn't work out or wasn't able to in the off season. And he lost 25 pounds. He was, much faster, much sleeker, much stronger when he came into camp this year. And, everyone says, I'm in the best shape of my life, but it really was true with him.
Dude, he's making himself a lot of money, though, right? I mean, he's gone from just a guy to being a guy that could take himself out into the market and really a career-altering kind of turnaround for him, right?
No doubt. And you could argue the best value on the team, though, is Logan Morrison. I mean, you should have heard the calls, the emails, the tweets I got when the Rays re-signed a guy who, had 14 homers and 40-some RBIs, and the first month and a half last year didn't have a homer or a ribby, and you looked at his numbers after that and heard how good he was in the clubhouse, and they signed him for $2.5 million. I mean, he's probably
hit 40 home runs,
the first
right?
month alone.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got 21, and he started the weekend at 21 and 51.
Yeah, and it's June. That's that's what's missing around here, and you're going to see that with no Davis in the lineup. And our problem right now also is this 2018 at the end of the year. Buck and Duquette up now, right? You got Machado, you got Britton, you got Brock, and you got Jones all coming up at the end of next year. And this year does not look like a year in any way that they can win a World Series. If you want to make a case that everybody else sucks and maybe you could find some way to cobble together some wins, and they're talking about being buyers 6 weeks from now, we have been talking, at least intelligent people in baseball have to be talking about Manny Machado and saying, are you really going to give him $320 million 16 months from now? Because if you're not, you better take him out onto the marketplace in a year where your pitching's upside down and everybody has a 6.5 ERA and mail one in an effort to get some real progress. Because, Neil, you know this. You're an organization that everything about that organization talks about what's going on at A and Double A. It's almost the franchise of perpetual hope from the scouting side. That's not going on around here. There are no great hopes coming through this organization right now, and Machado would be the kind of piece that could bring that into the future if you're not going to give him $30 million a year.
He is, but the one thing I would say from an outsider's perspective is the one thing that I realized last year is the most valued thing at the trading deadline in the regular season is relief pitching. You saw that with Andrew Miller. You saw it with Aroldis Chapman, even guys like secondary guys like Will Smith. There aren't many major position players that are dealt at the deadline because, I think people feel the relievers can win you playoff games and playoff series. In a short period with a guy adjusting to a new league or a new team, usually those deals happen in the off season. So they may not get the value they want if they're looking to do something like that. Now, I'm not saying they should or shouldn't, but I think it may be harder now than it is, let's say, in November or December.
Well, it's also harder when he's hitting 225, right? I mean, this has been a real – look, I think they could have – you never can plan for injuries, right? But I don't think anyone had the plan that at this point in his career where it is a very tender point based on whether you're going to pay him or not. And for himself, for his agent, for his bargaining, for their bargaining at the trading deadline, for where the team is, I don't think anybody predicted him hitting 220 right now. This was not on the schedule, and I don't even know that they know what to do with it.
It's hard. I mean, and it shows how challenging this game is. Look what the Rays are doing. And Evan entered the weekend hitting, 250 with 10 and 40, which is okay, but it's not the numbers he put up last year. It's a much harder game than people realize. And, It'd be nice to say, in a real world that you can just pencil him in for 30 and 100, but as good as even Manny is, I mean, it's hard to pencil in 30 and 100 and say it's going to happen.
Man, Tommy Hunter's like a wet boogie, right? He just keeps coming back, man. I mean, he's having another, like, really okay year, and a year where he would have been, the Orioles could have used the kind of year he's having right now out of their bullpen. They could have used about 3 of him. We got problems throughout. The rotation's been a problem. The back end, as you pointed out, when you start losing the back end, everybody moves up and everything gets discombobulated. And as much as Duquette and Buck have utilized the Norfolk shuttle back and forth, you guys have had some consistency out of the bullpen to go along with the starting pitching, right?
At least from the closer. Alex Colomé has done an awesome job. I mean, he's right at the top of the American League in saves. The hard part has been figuring out how to get to Alex. Tommy missed about a month with a calf strain. And I think his presence was missed because, he is a good clubhouse guy. He's a character, as you know. But he also, I think, was kind of a steadying influence in some of the young guys. We had, until this weekend, Brad Boxberger had been out the whole year. Xavier Cedeno has been out most of the year. Sean Tollison, who we signed as a free agent, was out a good part of the year. The Rays also went through a lot of bullpen injuries, and they had a couple of kids they were counting on joining them who also got hurt at the AAA level. So, they've had to really dip into their system a little bit, and having Tommy just in the clubhouse to be an influence on some of the younger pitchers has really helped out. And I think they'd love to slide him to like that 6th, 7th inning role, but he's had to kind of pick up a more substantial role so far. But I think he has done a pretty solid job all in all.
Neil Solondz joining us here from Tampa and the Tampa Bay Rays Radio Network. You can follow him out on Twitter. Let's get off the Rays and the Orioles, talk about the rest of these goons in the American League East who are trying to run away from everybody. Boy, I gave the Yankees a lot of credit. I was the guy in the offseason saying, beware of them. They're not just the boogeyman in 2019 and 20 coming to take your Manny Machado or their Bryce Harper or whomever it might be out in the marketplace with their checkbook. But the trades they made last year, and I think Cashman's kind of underrated, and certainly Girardi. I love the way they fought to the finish line last year, and that Gary Sanchez, a star, is born in the offseason. And look, I know they've cooled off the last 2 weeks, but they are a force to be reckoned with because of the trading deadline, because of what they have, and the checkbook as well. And here come the Red Sox, maybe on schedule. I mean, they got off to a rough start. They had a lot of injuries. They had that flu bug. They had crazy stuff going on there in April for the whole franchise, but they seem to have sort of neutralized at this point, and it feels like those two teams, not just this summer, but as you know, because you've been around this as long as I have, once they start to put a little distance between you and them, and especially around here, it becomes perpetually hard to catch up, and I'm worried about them not over the next 5 weeks, but really over the next 5 years.
I can understand that. I think especially from the Yankee standpoint, because I think they not only have they've put themselves in like good financial position where they've got some contracts coming off the books. They've got obviously a ton of young players. I mean, I don't think anyone, I didn't think that Aaron Judge was going to be this good this fast. I mean, last year he struck out, half his at-bats? I know it was a small sample size, but I didn't think he'd suddenly explode into a monster. And you look at some of the other young players they've got on the come, I mean, they've got a strong nucleus. I think the Red Sox have some of that, but I also think they've also dealt some players. They got rid of Moncada. They got rid of Kopech. They went out and they have some bad contracts. Pablo Sandoval's a bad contract. Hanley Ramirez has not lived up to billing. And, David Price has had, who we know well, has had a challenge in Boston. So I think to me, if I were to pick which of the two is in better position the next 5 years, I'd say the Yankees are right now.
Neil, you feeling like playoffs? I mean, you feel like September 15th you're going to be doing post-game radio where you're a game or 2 or 3 or up or down or in the race this year?
I hope so. I think I'm going to have a better feel once we get to the trading deadline and seeing what position this group is in. It's been a weird year in that they've never been more before this weekend 3 over 500 and never been lower than 3 under 500. So the whole time they've kind of been able to kind of stay the course, and they started this weekend with 12 players on the DL, which is a lot. So if they start to really get healthier and get that number down, and then adding Wilson Ramos and Boxberger kind of solidify the lineup in the bullpen, I think it's possible. The teams that worry me in this league, let's say if you're talking wild card, if they don't win the division, Kansas City, do they have another run in them? Can Texas figure it out with their pitching because they've been missing Cole Hamels for a long time? Those are the kinds of teams that I think have a little more firepower. But I certainly think the Rays, at least from an offensive standpoint, have all the abilities to be able to at least hang in this thing into September.
Houston's making this thing look too easy, right?
You know, and they're doing it now with like, what, 2/5 or 3/5 of their rotation on the DL, too.
That really speaks to your depth, doesn't it? I mean, that shows how good your executives are when that happens and you don't miss a beat, right?
Well, take a look at the lineup they put together. I mean, when you're putting out Correa and Springer and McCann and Gaddis and Beltran.
And Altuve, don't forget him. He's pretty good, too.
Yeah, and Altuve and Bregman and Gurriel. I mean, I remember the one series they came here, and the Rays still have to go to Houston in late July, early August, where, you know, there's just no rest. No deficit is or no lead is safe against that lineup. And in a day and age where, you know, we're seeing the home run balls fly out at you know, meteoric rates, you know, they're right at the top in terms of what they can provide. And plus they're fitted perfectly for that ballpark, which is very home run heavy.
Hey, man, we got it this weekend. Next weekend, we'll see you here. We'll see you there. We'll see you everywhere. We'll be following you out on Twitter as well. Always appreciate your time, man. And all is well. Your sister's doing okay? Everything's good there?
She's doing great. She's doing great. They adopted twins a little bit over a year and a half ago, her and her husband, and everything's going awesome.
Awesome. Neil, by the way, saved his sister's life with a bone marrow transplant, which was the genesis of our friendship. And my wife throwing out the first pitch 2 years. Been 2 years ago this month since my wife threw out the first pitch down there. You know, she didn't throw it off the mound. I still give her a hard time about that. But she did deal me a strike from the original mound on the hill at Tiger Stadium a week later.
Nice.
I either grounded out to third or singled to left, depending on who you hear tell the story. But the video is up on YouTube, and it's there for your imagination. So I got to stand in the same batter's box as, like, Brooks Robinson. And, you know, it was good stuff. So the tour still lives, so we still love baseball, and we'll be watching all week. And thanks for coming on, Neil.
You got it. Anytime.
Neil Solondz joining us here from the Tampa Rays radio group. Pre- and post-game, he's had a whole lot more better baseball to talk about here as the Orioles and the Rays get together at the Trop this weekend. You can find me anywhere the internet is sold in the Buy a Toyota audio vault 24 hours a day, all weekend long. Talking some NFL. We got some basketball, post-draft stuff going on, as well as just some great conversations, which we do around here all the time at WNST.net. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. Chapter 7 of the Peter Principles now available at the website as well, and we've been talking about that a little bit on social media as well. Email me anytime, anywhere, from anywhere in the world. It's nasty@WNST.net. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.